And let's be honest about why companies do performance improvement plans or PIPs, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah,
is to
right.
protect their own ass, not yours, the employee.
That's right.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to Truth Works, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode.
Hi there.
Hey.
Welcome to Truth Works. And today we're going to talk about saying goodbye. But before we get started, how you doing, girl?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a beautiful sunny day here. You got cows mooing in Texas?
It's cold here, It's a little chilly,
yeah.
a little gloomy, not very sunny. So I'm a little jealous of you, Patty McCord.
As you should be, as you usually are.
I miss those California vibes.
Miss those California vibes. Speaking of California vibes, that's where we probably start this journey. One of the first questions on the list is, do you remember the first time you had to let somebody go? And I do. I was 23 and I was supervising 32 people. And there was a woman that worked for me. She was twice as old as me, and she'd spend the first 15 minutes of her day putting out her cards, and she only wore purple. And the cards said things like, today's the first day of the rest of your life, be happy, there's unicorns. But she didn't actually do anything. So my first goodbye conversation with her, she kind of reached over the desk and patted my hand. She's like, honey, you did okay.
She was consoling you.
I'm crying. Yeah, she was comforting me. She's like, it's all right. I know that I don't do anything. It's okay. You're going to be all right. So that was my first goodbye.
So my first goodbye was at a similar time. I think I was 23, 24, around the same age. And I was a headhunter. And somehow I was good at headhunting, and they made me a manager of team. And we hired all these entry-level folks, and we would just try out a bunch and see who would make it and who wouldn't,
Yeah.
And I guess we weren't that far apart in age because I was young too, but it was like this little kid to me. And he really wanted to be so good at it. And he tried so hard. And we did all this cold calling, right? And he was horrible on the phone, like horrible and nervous. And I kept coaching him and helping him. And he just was like, I want to do this so bad. I want to do this. And so my boss was like, you got to let him go. Like, he can't do it. Like, he's never going to be able to do it. I was like, but he wants to do it so bad. And he's like, I know, but he can't. And you're just going to have to tell him that. And he cried, right? And I didn't cry, but we did hug, which often happens when I let people go. I'm not sure why, but yeah, he cried and he was like, I want to do this so bad. Can I be good? I said, I think there's going to be other things that you're really good at. And the good news is you have a lot of determination.
That's such a good segue into now fast forward all these years that you and I have been doing this. And I would say the last 10 or 20 years for both of us have been not really us saying goodbye, but us coaching other people on how to do a good goodbye. And both of our examples are perfect examples of, how you figure out that person can't stay. Right.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to talk about that I put in our notes was the keeper test. So talk about the keeper test.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we'll probably talk about the keeper test in a lot of our episodes.
Conversations.
Yeah. I really have found the no tool better than the keeper test. I've tried hard because, this can't just be the only good tool. Right.
Right.
But I haven't found anything better. And it really works to make a emotional decision about what's happening with a certain person, right?
Mhm.
Because, if you go up and you ask somebody, "Oh, how's Patty doing?" They'll be like, "Oh, she's
Mhm.
Patty's good. She's fine.
She's working really hard. She's trying. She really wants to.
Yeah, she really wants to." But when you come in and you ask, "Hey, Patty's going to come to you. She's going to give notice for a slightly better job with slightly better pay at a competitive firm. How hard are you going to fight to keep Patty?" And then you see the person in the management role really start to think, like, huh,
Uh-huh.
I don't
Uh-huh.
know.
Uh, yeah, another version is if you knew Patty, you know everything you already know about Patty, and you had an opening for her job for next year.
Yeah.
That's what the other thing is, like, people look like you said, he's trying really hard, he wants to, but if you instead said, knowing that we have to recruit X number of people at this level tomorrow and we're going to need a bazillion cold calls, would you hire this person again?
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think there's those two prongs of the keeper test. One of them is, would you fight hard to keep them? And the other one is, if they walked in the door, would you hire them again for the job that they're going to do tomorrow?
Yeah. Not today.
Right, today. And so I think that's the way we start this conversation of the good goodbye, because first you got to decide,
Hmm.
right? And one of my favorites is, you go to the manager, and the manager comes to you and says, "Jessica's total failure. She can't do it. All she does is try, but she never executes, and it's driving me crazy. And it's time for her to go. That's it. I've had it with her. I've told her before. She does it one more time. It's time for her to go." And I say, "Okay, you wait here, and I'll go ask Jessica how she's doing." And I come ask you, and you go, "Oh, yeah, we've worked together for 4 years here. And every 6 months or so, he gets really mad at me and he yells at me and I cry. And it's something about my interdepartmental communication has issues, and there are issues with other people around me, and blah, 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 blah. But what I do is I just hide." And and then I go away, and then 6 months later he has it again. It's been going on for years, right? So my two rules for termination are: you must keep your dignity, and you can't be surprised.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the one where you have to go back to that manager and go, "Well, let me tell you where she's thinking she's at."
Right. No, and I mean, and how often, Patty, because I find it very often, the individuals, they don't know. Managers
Mhm.
have not said a word or given them
Mhm.
any feedback. And you go and you ask them and how they're doing. "Oh, pretty good. Yeah, I'm doing really good. I think I'm doing all the things I need." Yeah.
My last performance review, the only thing it said on it was I had some issues with interdepartmental communication, but I didn't know what that is, so I haven't done anything about it.
I um the first time I left Netflix and I went to be the head of HR at a startup, the two founders who were co-CEOing, the week I start, they're like, "Hey, you got to fire this woman." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. What's up?" They're like, "She's just really, really terrible, really terrible." And okay, she messes up everything, and she was the office manager, so at this point, she kind of had her hands in a little bit of everything. She was doing
Uh-huh.
payroll, she was doing
Yeah,
finance,
classic
like
startup.
yeah,
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 right. Right.
and
Chief of staff.
yeah, and I'm like, does she know that you all aren't happy with her? They're like, "Well, yeah, we think she knows. We think she knows." I'm like, "Are you sure?" Like, "Well, I don't know for sure, but she should know. She should know."
Uh-huh.
And so I go talk to her and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I love it here. They are the best people to work for. We're doing this, we're doing that, we're growing so fast." And I walked back in and said to them, I said, this is my first week here. Like, this poor woman does not know
Uh-huh.
that she's not performing.
Uh-huh.
You two have not told her a thing. In fact, she thinks she's
Uh-huh.
like kind of the it thing around here.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I don't think it makes sense to fire her. I think it makes sense to like give her some feedback and then that way we can do it. It won't be a surprise. We can have some, grace and humanity within the process. It won't take long.
Oh, so you recommended they put her on a performance improvement plan?
Oh, no, I did not. I said it won't take long, but
So
we
I
don't
think
need to.
right, this is the point where we need to both intervene and go, okay, like once you've decided somebody isn't going to work out. And then for me, in all the years I said goodbye, I found that there were a couple of reasons that were pretty standard for saying goodbye.
Yeah.
One of them was you hired somebody who you thought could do the job, but they couldn't. Right. And sometimes in startups and stuff, it's because you don't really know what the job is. Right.
That's true.
So
Which
you
this lady didn't, she clearly didn't.
You hire the smartest, nicest person you can, and you give them a job and you go, I think it's just answering phones.
But, the two founders, they got lucky because that day she missed payroll. She missed payroll for the whole company.
Yeah, because she probably didn't know how to do it.
No, she didn't know how to do it.
No, but my point is, like, reason number one is you hired the wrong person. And when that happens, it's a no-fault situation for them. Yeah. They didn't do anything wrong. No. You hired, second one is the one you just described, right? You hired him for a job and then the job changed. And then it changed, and then it changed, and then it changed. And it's more and more and more and more. Now you're like, we have to fire her because she doesn't know how to do payroll. But when you hired her, she didn't know anything about payroll, right? So that's number two. Number three is the business changes. And that brings me to what I think is really important in keeping people informed, right? If you're always looking forward and the manager's always saying, here's what tomorrow looks like, here's what it's going to take, here's how we're going to succeed, this is what we need to get done, this is the time frame we need to do it, then my experience is half the time you just grow out of people.
Yeah. And it's, it's no fault of anyone's, right? Because and look, like some people are sort of lucky. They adapt and flex and can scale longer than others, but some are not. And it doesn't mean that they weren't great at the time that they were great. And it doesn't mean that they didn't make an impact. And I think that when it gets to decision time, I don't know whether this is human nature or it's avoidance of conflict. I'm not sure what it is, but the person firing the other person, they just get mad at them, right? And
well, it's a breakup, right? So you have to hate them to say goodbye,
right? And so I don't know whether that's like human nature or that's just how they like gear up for letting them go.
I personally think it's because most people don't have the tools to be honest most of the time.
Yeah.
So there's two things I want to call out here. One of them is the annual performance review, right? So when I go back and I say to Jessica, he says that at your last one-on-one, he told you that you weren't doing very well and the same problems were coming up. And you say to me, that was 9 months ago. Right. That was when I had my annual performance review. And so it's been 9 months. He hasn't said a thing. So that's not fair. So that's why I hate that because the feedback isn't consistent enough.
Yeah, no, I hate it.
The second part is the performance improvement plan. So let's take that for 1 second and take it apart. What if it really was a performance improvement plan? Right. I would be such a huge fan, right? Jessica, there's a couple things that you keep missing. And so I think you can do it. Yeah. So let's put together a plan so that we can see how this works out and if you can do it. And let's do it in a period of time. But what it's come to mean is a shitty, horrible, torturous way to fire you to prove that you're incompetent.
Yes.
Right. Which is my third reason for firing. Right. Which is sometimes you hire somebody to do a job and they're amazing at it and they do it and then you don't need them to do it anymore.
And let's be honest about why companies do performance improvement plans or PIPs, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Is to protect their own ass, not yours, the employee.
That's right.
It is all about risk for them and documenting that they gave you time to improve. And if they also prove to you that you are a complete mess and should be fired, then you're less likely to sue them.
Except that the mere process itself makes you crazy, right? So I say, so I'm going to put you on a plan every 2 weeks. We're going to sit down. I'm going to prove that you're incompetent in writing. I'm going to yell. You're going to cry. And the thing that people don't realize with that process is it's not just about you and me. Because they see you and I do that. Everybody knows, right?
Yeah.
And the same people that have come to me and said, Jessica's terrible. She's not getting her work done. She doesn't do anything right, are now going, she has a baby and you're making her cry.
Well,
how could you do this to poor Jessica, right?
Yes.
And so what happens is Jessica says, he never told me anything about this. This is a complete surprise to me. I don't know why this is happening. It's got to be because I'm a woman and I'm pissed. And then that's why you sue.
Right, exactly.
People sue companies because they're mad.
Duh. And that's why it's broken, because it does the opposite of what it says it's going to do. It actually makes the two parties more aggravated and more legal risk for the company than not, right?
Well, and I think that the hidden costs that I observed throughout the years was everybody else on the team is affected by this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We think that it's just you and your manager, but everybody else knows on Tuesday you have that meeting.
Yeah.
Everybody else knows at 11:30 you run into the ladies' room crying, right? I mean, and everybody else thinks I'm next.
Yeah. Yeah. And talk about culture of fear versus what you're suggesting, which is like, hey, look, there's some things you need to do better. Let's try together. Not putting them on a performance improvement plan, but giving them an actual chance to perform better.
Performance improvement plan.
Because I mean, how many people come off of a performance improvement plan not fired? I don't think many.
But conversely, you and I have seen hundreds of times where the manager sat down with the person and said, okay, you really need to listen to me now.
Yeah.
There's some stuff you need to fix, right? And so, for example, I remember somebody's like, I remember saying to him, you're an asshole, okay? Nobody says that to you, but I'm going to tell you that right now. And you're ambitious. Right? And I know you want to be a leader here someday, and I want you to be amazing. But here's the deal. You're an asshole. You yell at people. You take up all the room. You think you're the star of every meeting. You got to be the one that has every conversation. And guess what leaders do? They have followers. Right. And so you're not going to get to be a leader unless people want. I mean, so here's my performance improvement plan for this individual. In 3 months, I'm going to ask the people around you, would you want to work for him? And I don't care if you bribe them with money, right? I want them to say, can't wait to do some work with this person because he builds the greatest teams and he makes things so successful, right?
And if I think I know who you're talking about, it worked.
It totally worked. Yeah, because partly his ego and partly because he was really talented and I didn't want to lose the person. But let's go back to the goodbye, right? Yeah. Let's talk about some practical stuff. Okay, so it's time to have that conversation. Okay, we know we've had a conversation. Hopefully you know it's coming, except nobody ever knows it's coming, right? And you're about to get fired. So let me say a couple of words about that word. There are no guns. There's no blood. And all that using the word fire bring is shame.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody feels that shame when they're having the conversation. So I know you didn't either. They're like, well, why don't you do it for me? You're good at it. I'm like, they don't work for me.
Yeah. Nope.
They work for you. And oh, by the way, this is something, if you're going to be a leader, that you need to get really, really good at it.
Yeah.
Right. And you said people always hug you. That's when you know you're good at goodbye. Right.
Yeah.
But I say, look, so first of all, write down all the reasons why this isn't working out. Go ahead and type all that. She's a piece of shit. She doesn't talk to anybody. Everybody hates her. Blah, 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 blah. And then cross out anything that's not performance related or skills related. Okay. And then put it in 5 bullet points. And then this is my very, very best, most practical piece of advice. Call your phone right? Call your cell phone and record what you're going to say,
Yeah.
right?
No, I
And
tell people
feel
to do the
those
same
words.
thing.
Feel
Yeah.
the words in your mouth, right? Because you sound so brilliant in your head, and then when you
Oh,
start
yeah,
saying,
when you say it
"Well,
out loud, you're
Jessica,
like a
you've been a really great person. You've really contributed a lot," and then Jessica's like, "What is this converse?" And then I say, and listen to it back as if you're the person you're talking to,
yes.
and then imagine that person telling their grandmother.
Right. Exactly. And I also tell people to do it in the mirror. Look at yourself in the mirror, right? Because it's hearing it and saying it out loud is one thing, but look in the mirror and look at yourself when you know what I mean. There's something when you deliver the message in how you can connect with that person and
Right.
show empathy. And it's almost like when you're doing it in the mirror, you're doing it to yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
you kind of want to treat the person how you
As you would be
would want to be
treated.
treated, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I always say the first words out of your mouth are "thank you."
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because even if you've convinced yourself that you have to hate the other person to break up, you kept them there
Yeah.
until they made you mad.
Right. Exactly. So that's a really good point, and I want to talk about that for 1 second. Is that
Mhm.
and my point of like bringing up getting mad and hating the person a little bit is to say if you can find a way to let it go, and maybe to your example of writing it down and then crossing out the things that aren't like skills and performance related, maybe you can, because maybe you are amping yourself up. You know, gotta do this to this person, so I hate them, right? It's much
Mhm.
easier to fire someone you hate, right, than
Mhm.
someone you really love. However, if you can get rid of that, because I think it really impacts the whole situation, right? Because
Mhm.
you're just you're angry, and so you're
Mhm.
not doing things how you would normally do them. You're not saying things how you would normally say it. You're not acting how you would normally act. You're short with the person. You're and it's demeaning, and to your point, creates shame.
Which is the dignity part.
Right.
You must keep your dignity. You must walk out. So one of my stories is about, and you probably remember this person too. It was a QA engineer. And this woman was incredible, but we had been working really hard on automating testing, right? And so finally we had automated the last test. And so her manager came in and I'm like, oh, she knows, I've been sitting next to her at meetings for 6 months talking about, and, she knows they're all, so she'll be fine. So he comes in and he goes, she wasn't fine. She cried hysterically. She went home. She slammed doors. Everybody on the team is like, oh my God, we feel so bad. So I called her up. I'm like, do you want to meet me somewhere? You want to get your butt in here, right? I'm like, are you kidding? You've been here 8 years. Could you surprise me like this? I'm like, come on. We've sat next to each other at these conversations. You're the last man standing because you're the best, right? Because you're the best at what you do. We're done with that part, right? So you better walk out of here with your head up high and dry those tears and get yourself a raise because you are the best test engineer we've ever had. And I will give you a screamingly fabulous recommendation, and I'll help you find that next job because we wouldn't be here without you.
Yeah.
Right. And there are words that we can teach each other like that. Like, we get it. Okay. We would not be here without you.
Yeah. And I think to get to that point, going back to being angry about the situation, is owning your part in it. Like when I walk leaders through, well, how did we get here? And it's a we, right? And there's a
Yeah.
responsibility that you have in this situation. It's not all on this individual. First of all, you hired them.
Yeah.
Secondly, you're the one who didn't give them feedback, right?
Right.
And thirdly, you, to your point a minute ago, are the one who kept them here so long. And 6 months ago, when I asked about this person, they were doing great. So, what's your role in this?
Yeah. I
And
love
you
that
got to
we
own
part.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I see that gets rid of some of the sort of resentment, anger.
Yeah. And The other thing I want to make sure that we say is that saying goodbye well is a skill.
Mhm.
It can be learned. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's not that I call myself the queen of the goodbye. And people would say, well, how come you're so good at it? I mean, I'm best friends with people that I've said goodbye to.
Me too.
Best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should also talk about you and me, but it doesn't mean that you don't care about them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that. So I would say, when you know you're good at it is when you know you can say goodbye before it's so hurtful.
Yeah.
Right. You can, and so you got to watch. That's a whole different podcast about setting people up to fail.
Yeah. I think going back to like, you can learn it, but and it's true. You can learn how to, and we learned how to do it because we
We
wanted to do
practice.
it well and we had
Yeah.
practice, right? But I think
Mhm.
what happens when you're a leader in any organization, and it's not just letting people go, you don't have any practice with, you don't practice with anything. They promote you into
Mm-mm.
these, roles because you're good at your craft. You're a good engineer, you're good at finance, like whatever. And now all of a sudden you got to hire all these people. You got to develop them and you got to fire them.
I always tell people when they get promoted, I'm like, congratulations on your promotion. Today you have two things you didn't have yesterday. You have a new word on your business card. Right? Manager of, director of, VP of. The second thing you have that you didn't have yesterday is now you're psychic. Right?
Yeah.
Well, he should have known. He should have known what I mean. Right? You know how you always say, my manager ought to know, right? All of a sudden now you're the one that ought to know. Do ya?
Do you? And you don't. And, you know, that is something that I think we tried to help coach all of our leaders to do well. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think other organizations do. Again, they rely
Mm-hmm.
on these performance improvement plans. And look, like if you're at a company that has this process or a similar one, that doesn't mean that you can't learn to say goodbye well. You
That's
can.
right.
You
Right.
you own this. And
Yeah.
also, regardless of the company's process, you own the relationship with this person moving forward.
I was thinking the other day because I was coaching I'm on a nonprofit, and somebody came up with the old adage like, "Well, why don't we just torture her and she'll quit?"
Yeah. Well, that's
Right?
what I
I
think a
mean,
performance
doesn't
improvement
every
a performance improvement
yeah,
plan is kind of that.
exactly. And I was thinking, I was like, God, I haven't heard that in a really long time, right? And it's like it won't work.
Yeah.
Right? They'll just keep trying, right? You're like, "You can't do this," and then they'll do that, and they can't do this, and then they'll do that. They can't do this. And I always like when people, I wanna say goodbye, and I wanna tell her on Thursday because, she doesn't show up to work on time and doesn't get her work done, but I'd like her to transition for a month. Like, okay, well, she's certainly gonna show up on time when you said, "Get out of here."
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's figure out a way to not say fired. Let's find a way to separate. Let's find a way to realize that our careers are journeys and everybody is going to leave and everybody's going to start again, right? Which sort of leaves me with wanting to say my most powerful thing that I ever say, which is make your company a great place to be from.
Yeah. It's so
And
true.
if that's true, then you get to keep your dignity,
Yeah.
right? If that's true. And for me at Netflix, and I know for you too, it was how do we constantly create the kind of organization that people are proud to have on their resume?
Yeah.
Right. So if they leave, then they don't have to go, those people treated me poorly. They were terrible. You know this when you interview somebody, it's like, oh my God, we have to listen to the 10 minutes about how horrible your last company was.
Right.
And wouldn't it be better? Aren't you more likely to hire the person that says, we did amazing things, it just didn't work out?
Yeah.
That's what you want to tell your grandmother.
And that's life. It's just life. I mean,
Yeah.
it's I used to talk to people about there's a show I watch, Patty. It's a reality show.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's called Married at First Sight. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've seen it. I've
Have you seen
seen
it?
it. It's crazy.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah. So,
But work's kind of like
it
that.
is. That's why I tell people, I'm like, this is, you are, going into a relationship with someone, but you've spent zero time with each other. You've maybe
Mhm.
spent an hour
A day.
total with this
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
and talked to them a handful of times. You haven't seen them in action. You haven't seen them do the work. There's risk in this decision, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like,
For both of us.
yes, for both parties. That's why, I always use the analogy of Married at First Sight, which most no one had ever seen that I was talking to, because it's like all these engineers. They're like, what? And I was like, people do that? I'm like, yes. And it's
Yes,
on
they do.
television. Um, and and that's the thing. I think we have to say, like, everybody's going into this with the best intentions. And on the show,
That's right.
Married at First Sight, they want to find a partner. They want to find their
Mhm.
forever person. You want to find the person that's going to fulfill this role to its fullest. They want to do great stuff.
Mhm.
They do.
Mhm.
But then
Mhm.
sometimes it
And
doesn't work out.
sometimes they do
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm a person who left the company, right? Was Netflix a great company for me to be from? Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
You too, right? So if everybody looks deep, they'll find that they've had that experience too. It may not have been at work yet, but it will be at work someday. And most of the time it's because you decide to move on.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the other part about, I think we should close with something positive, right? And the positive part is, when you hire people, they're going to leave their company.
Yeah.
And when you leave the company, you're going to get hired. That's how it works.
It is how it works. All right, it is that time for Confession Corner. How do I tell people they're being made redundant? Unfortunately, I've recently been tasked with making 20 people redundant at work due to a restructuring. It's not a decision I take lightly, and the responsibility feels overwhelming. Where do I even begin with this process? And once I've decided who, how do I communicate the news? How can I soften the blow, both emotionally and practically? I'm feeling a bit lost as I've never fired anyone before. So many experiences, resources, or advice would be invaluable right now. Patty, what do you
Mhm.
say?
Well, it's always a tough situation. And I mean,
Well,
it's
first of
one of
all,
those
this person's never
things.
fired anyone, and now they're having to fire 20 people at once.
20 people. Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, so this is always, I want to go back and say what you should have done, which you probably didn't. What should have happened is that people should be aware of whatever's going on in the organization that requires you to do a restructuring. Right. And so the practical tips are the ones we just said about saying goodbye, look in the mirror, practice your speech, but you want to just be straight with people. You've all the same thing, right? Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for everything you've contributed. Unfortunately, we need to restructure the company because, and then tell the truth,
Yes, about what's
right?
happening.
Because we hired too many people, and
Because we're making a shift in the business, like whatever it is.
because we thought the revenue was going to be X and
Yep.
it turns out to be Y, and our projections don't have it move for, it's like, here's the business reason
Yeah.
for this restructuring. And if you've never done it before and you need some tips, you need to go talk to your CFO
Yeah.
or your CEO or your manager or your VP, right?
Or your
So say to
CHRO. Yeah.
or CHRO, whatever it is, you need somebody to help you, give you the language for why the restructuring. Because if you go out and say, they made me, and I was totally surprised, which is what most people do.
Yeah.
It wasn't my decision. It was their decision. So sorry, but you have to go.
Yeah. I'm just the bearer of bad news.
Everybody who's left is like, oh shit.
Yeah. No, and this is where I feel like in this situation, and perhaps this person's getting more support than we realize. But companies tend to take laying people off pretty seriously. They want to do it well. They want to take care of the people because they know it's not necessarily their fault. Because again, maybe it's revenue, maybe it's a business pivot, who knows? But you should, to Patty's point, be talking to your CFO and higher level executives about what's the message that they want to send to these individuals,
Mhm.
and how can we tell them the truth so that they can walk out of here with their heads held high.
Yeah, and you wanna have the whole process laid out before you have a conversation,
Totally.
and do it all, like, instantly.
Yes.
Right? The
Right.
first layoff we had at Netflix, I remember I stood up in front of the staff and I'm like, "We're gonna do this the way I tell you to do. You're gonna do everything I say in the order in which I say it." And somebody else goes, "Well, you don't, you know, I've done it before." I'm like, "Yeah, you've done it wrong. I worked with you before." Okay? So like here's how to do it right. Stand up and say, "We're sorry. Here's the situation." I actually had Reed tell everybody in the parking lot at once. It's my decision. Here's what's going to happen. Some of you are going to stay and some of you are going to go. Okay. So, and it could be the person next to you that stays and it could be the person next to you that goes. And I'm really, really sorry, but there won't be anybody if we don't do this. It's the last thing we have to commit.
Nobody's really doing it in parking lots anymore, Patty. It's all virtual.
Yeah, okay. It's all virtual. And the other thing is like you need to it's a timing thing. It's
Yeah.
like getting ready for an interview.
No.
Okay, and I'm going to have this conversation with you. You're going to know you're going to go. You're going to need 5 minutes to go, "Oh shit, I just got laid off." Then you're going to go to HR and then you need to know as the person who's saying goodbye, do they get a severance? Do they not get a severance? Do they leave today? Do they not leave today? Can they take their stuff? Can they not take their stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
all that
No,
practical stuff.
there's a lot of work that you have to have leading up to this, and you've got to have, to your point, everything laid out, dialed in, because you cannot miss anything. To your point, can they have access to their email? Will they be able to take
Will
their
you give them a
laptops?
reference?
Will you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can they talk to other employees after this is done? Right? Like, so it seems odd to me that this person would be on their own on this, but
Uh-huh.
if they are, they should really push the
Reach out.
company to do this in the best way possible.
Yeah, and reach out to other managers. I
Yeah.
mean, almost all of us have been in this situation before.
Yeah.
So this is a place where you can talk to, like, to your peers, right? Has anybody else ever done this before? What tips would you give me?
Yeah.
But be honest and be compassionate, right?
Yeah.
But don't point fingers up. Because that not only hurts the people that you're saying goodbye to, it hurts the people that are left. And so that's the other part about layoffs is that most people screw up is they feel so guilty about the people that are gone, they forget about the people who stay.
Yeah. It's a great point. And I was talking to someone the other day, and my coaching to them was that this can also be a moment for inspiration. Right?
Mhm.
It's a moment to say goodbye, and it's hard to say goodbye. You're going to do it well. You're going to be incredibly thoughtful about it. But to your point, you have a whole host of people who are staying, right?
Mhm.
And your job in this moment is to also inspire them.
That's right.
So it's
That's
not
right.
just about
Yeah.
saying goodbye to these people. It's about
Right.
inspiring.
And it feels really bad
Yeah.
and it is really hard and it's
Yeah.
a tough thing for them.
Yeah.
But you want to offer compassion, you want to offer empathy, and you want to offer help. Can they write their resume on their work computer?
Yeah.
What's their last day, right?
All those things.
What are you going to say when someone calls you? So,
Right.
yeah. Good luck, friend.
Yeah.
This is the trial by fire. Not fired, fire.
Fire.
Thanks for listening to TruthWorks. This episode was produced and edited by Megan Hayward and Mick Finnegan. Thank you, Kathleen Speckert, and the whole Edit Audio team.